What rule exists due to you? When I was in high school, I lit a girl's hair on fire by accident during our National Honor Society induction ceremony. We had to carry candles for the whole induction, and after 30 minutes, I tilted my candle a little too far forward without noticing. I've never felt so embarrassed or guilty, but luckily only a small part of her hair burned. Anyway, my younger sister told me 2 years later that at her ceremony, they had to use electric candles because years ago a girl's hair was lit on fire. Oops.
That kind of stuff sticks with you. A simple mistake can lead to awkward moments. It's funny how a small incident like that turns into a story that's passed down. It's good that it wasn't more serious. Electric candles are definitely a safer bet. I guess some lessons are learned the hard way, but it's nice that people find a way to adapt. Just one of those high school memories that stays with you.
Not me, but a classmate. One of the guys on my speech and debate team was pretty buff. At tournaments in our state, the required dress code was business professional for competitors and school team shirt for others. This dude would always wear a team shirt under his suit so that he could relax outside of rounds. At the beginning of the year, he would take the leftover shirts from the previous year and wear them to tournaments. After taking off his suit and jacket, he'd always tear these shirts, Hulk style, to show off his body. The tournament coordinators weren't so happy about this, so they asked our coach to make him stop. Our coach thought it was hilarious, so he didn't make the dude stop. The next year, included in most tournament rules, was a detailed clause defining and prohibiting stripping. It's hilarious to see the novices read the rules and come across the clause with a look of pure confusion. TLDR, this dude kept pulling a magic mic, causing all of the schools to create a no stripping clause in the rules.
That's a funny story. I can picture the confusion on the novices' faces when they read that rule. It's interesting how one person's antics can lead to a whole new set of guidelines. That guy definitely made an impression on everyone. A bit of humor in such a serious environment probably lightened the mood. It's good your coach saw the fun in it instead of just shutting it down.
The school I went to from 3rd to 6th grade enacted a no gangs rule because of a club I started. My best friend, and I made it up, we called ourselves the Midgets. We walked around with our knees up our shirts and propelled ourselves forward with our hands like apes. There were initiation tests for recruits to get in, such as cross the monkey bars without your legs slipping out of your shirt. Another one was getting your swing moving high and jumping off without your legs slipping out of your shirt. When I ran it with my friend, it was pretty harmless, and we all just played games and stuff. I learned years later that after I went to middle school, the kids who took it over became bullies and would trip people in the halls and were generally ruffians. The principal confiscated the rule book I wrote up with the different tests to rank up and forbade all gang-like activity from the campus.
That's kind of wild how something innocent turned into a problem. The Midgets sounds like a fun idea with the ridiculous challenges. But it's disappointing that kids took it in a bad direction later on. It's weird how something meant to bring people together ended up being the spark for a no-gang rule at school. That stuff can change a whole vibe, and it's a shame that the enjoyment got lost along the way.
For the first 3 years of high school, I sold brownies in class for 50 cents each, at first because I wasn't old enough to get a job, and then because I didn't want to get a job. I tried to keep it low-key, so they didn't shut me down, but by the start of my senior year, there was a new section in the school handbook that explicitly forbids selling things in class.
That's kind of clever. It sounds like you were just trying to find a way to make some money and enjoy those brownies. I guess when something's working, people notice. It's funny how schools can be strict about simple things like that. You probably had a good run before they caught on, though. A little entrepreneurial spirit doesn't seem all that bad to me.
Rule number 1. Your monthly motivational speech to the team at work must contain actual spoken words. Rule number 2. Your monthly motivational speech to the team at work may not contain NSFW pictures. Edit. Rule number 2 was created a couple of months after rule number 1, after my second monthly motivational speech.
So, there was this time when I had to give a motivational speech at work. I thought I'd just show some funny pictures to lighten the mood. Turns out, that wasn't the best idea. After the meeting, my boss put down a new rule about no inappropriate pictures. It was a bit embarrassing, but now I just stick to actual words for motivation. Keep it simple and straightforward.
My high school was pretty small, and because of that, graduating students had to pick a member of the staff to make a speech and introduce us before we went up to the stage. The teacher I chose made a really epic speech with a lot of Lord of the Rings references, and at the end presented me with a replica necklace of a ring. Apparently at the staff meeting before next year's graduation ceremony, the principal made a point to tell everyone that gifts and 10-minute speeches weren't allowed. I'm pretty okay knowing that I'm the first and last student to have that privilege TBH.
That's a cool memory. Sounds like that teacher really made an impact. Getting a replica of the ring is pretty unique for a graduation gift. It's funny how rules change after something like that. Guess they wanted to avoid any more epic send-offs. It's nice to be the first and last, though. Makes your graduation stand out in a special way.
When I was in kindergarten, they'd let everyone out in a mass sort of huddle while teachers sort of overlooked. My mom was late one day, and I tried to walk home alone. Walked a block or two, thought I had walked an endless journey and got lost. Sat and cried until someone took me back to the school where my mom and teacher were. After that, teachers had to let out the kids only as their parents approached them.
That's a pretty relatable story. I remember getting lost too when I was a kid. It's a weird mix of panic and being overwhelmed by everything. It's good they changed the rules after that, though. No kid should have to feel that alone. It's funny how those small moments stick with you. Glad you made it back safely.
Not me, but due to my sister and my mom, my high school gained in school suspension. My sister was caught skipping school, so they were going to suspend her. My mom was furious and forced the school to keep her there cause why would you punish being out of school with being out of school? And thus, ISS was born.
That's an interesting situation. It's funny how a family's actions can change things for everyone. Your mom definitely made a point about punishment not really being a punishment. And I guess the school had to figure out some way to handle things with your sister. Now, there's a whole thing called ISS because of it. Shows how one incident can lead to new rules.
I got toothpicks banned from my school. I would buy boxes by the thousands and soak them into different flavors, such as peppermint, cinnamon, and spearmint, and then bake the flavor into them. I take those bad boys to school and sell them to kids to chew on, freshen breath, etc. Toothpicks were everywhere. Also, kids would use them as ammunition and rubber bands. Admin put a stop to that really quick.
That's an interesting story. I can see how toothpicks became a whole thing at your school. Flavored toothpicks sound kind of unique, but I guess the whole projectile thing got out of hand. Schools often crack down on stuff like that to keep things in check. It's funny how something simple can cause so much trouble. You probably had some good sales before they shut it down, though.
Everyone in my department has to work an extra half hour. We would work 8-hour shift, but I would always leave half an hour early and classify it as my lunch break. My logic was that as long as you took your lunch, who cares when during my shift it was? Management caught on after a few months, and now we all work an extra 30 minutes to compensate for lunch.
It's pretty funny how that backfired. I mean, you think you're being clever by leaving early, but then management just flips the script on everyone. Now, instead of sneaking out for a bit, everyone's stuck working longer. You can't really win sometimes. It's like they always have a way of finding out. Just goes to show that those little shortcuts can lead to longer hours for everyone in the end.
After my 30-foot-long entry, there is now a maximum length of 8 feet in Portland's adult soapbox derby. The car in question was an articulated dragon with 9 wheels, and it was covered in CD scales. It was quite a sight until the cutthroat round at the end of the day. It almost killed a man, the driver, in the crash. You won't be able to see another one like it now.
That sounds wild. I can't imagine what it must have been like to see a giant dragon rolling down the street. The cutthroat round and the crash adds a whole different layer. Glad the driver was okay, but it must have been a crazy ride overall. The limit on the length sounds understandable after that. Those unique creations are hard to come by, especially something like a CD-covered dragon.
In high school, I was on a skeet shooting team. A rule was made called the E-Rule, which stated that if anyone shot the trap house because they had an itchy trigger finger, they would be immediately disqualified. In my defense, I was challenged to shoot the clay as fast as I could, and I did break it as soon as it came out.
That sounds like a unique experience. High school teams can get intense, especially with strict rules like the E-Rule. It's funny how a challenge can lead to something that serious. I guess the adrenaline can take over sometimes. Shooting the clay must have felt good in the moment, but getting disqualified had to be a buzzkill. That must have made for some interesting conversations afterwards.
Just after I graduated high school, a few friends and I flew to England for a week and change. We stayed in a small town with my buddy's grandma. Conveniently, she lived across the street from a pub, which aside from the post office and the train station, was the only thing to do in town. We made friends rather quickly, and were astonished to find out they hadn't heard of beer pong. After a few nights of playing, it was banned when a handful of regulars got picked up for drunk driving. So, I guess the rule wasn't explicitly because of us, but if we hadn't shown up, it wouldn't be in place for a few more years, I think.
That sounds like a memorable trip. It's funny how something as simple as a game can lead to unexpected consequences. The fact that your beer pong games caught attention and led to a ban is pretty wild. It's like you guys left a mark on that little town. It's interesting to think about how your visit changed things, even if it wasn't your intention. Sometimes you just have to roll with it.
No more mercury allowed in science class. I was the kid that spilled mercury all over the place in a science class. It was in one of those mazes from back in the day, and I dropped it because I was nervous, and the maze broke and it cracked open and went everywhere. Class was evacuated and quarantined for 2 weeks. Letters were sent home about an incident that involved mercury, etc. Super funny to look back on. It definitely explains the twitch.
That sounds like quite the day in class. I can imagine the chaos when the mercury spilled. It's wild how something like that could lead to a 2-week quarantine. It's a memorable incident for sure. It's interesting how those moments stick with us, even if they cause some trouble. I guess it gives you a good story to tell later, too. A little twitch makes it even more memorable.
No props or costumes for class presentations. This wasn't for high school. No, this was for university. I think by the time we got to the 3rd year, they decided to stop letting me have too much fun with my presentations. One presentation included dressing up as a Russian foreign exchange medical student called Dr. Scotty Too Hottie for a discussion on AIDS.
That sounds like a memorable experience. I remember a friend of mine who got really creative with their presentations too. They would bring props and even act things out, but eventually, the professors told them to tone it down. Sometimes it felt like the fun got lost in trying to keep things all serious. It's a shame because those were the moments that made class more engaging.
During a summer football camp my sophomore year of high school, I was riding in the back of my buddy's pickup truck and cut my hand on the bed of the truck. I cut my left ring finger almost to the bone. I returned to the same camp during my senior year, did not attend my junior year, and there was a new rule, the my last name vehicle rule. Due to my ignorance, no one was allowed to ride in any vehicle at all at any time. During camp hours, we had to walk to and from every activity.
That sounds pretty rough. Getting hurt like that can really change the vibe of a camp. It's funny how one incident leads to a whole new rule. It must have changed how everyone interacted at the camp. Walking everywhere would probably make things feel different, too. It's a good reminder to be careful, but also kind of wild how one mistake can stick around for a while.
My senior year in high school, I was massively bored. Ran into a friend with a car in a hallway. He was bored too. We hopped in his car and started driving. We stopped by his house so he could get some money, etc. From that moment on, no one saw or heard from us for 30 days. We ended up in Amarillo from Philly. Rented a place, got jobs, went to the food store. Regular life. I was 17, he was 16. He ended up calling his mom. Party over. So because of this, they fenced in the parking lot and manned it with a security guard.
That sounds pretty wild. Just two bored kids deciding to hit the road and completely disconnect. It's interesting how spontaneity can lead to such unexpected experiences. Living a normal life for a month sounds surreal at that age. But I guess even the best adventures have to end. Fencing in the parking lot makes sense, though. Can't have that happening again. Just a reminder that sometimes, boredom leads to the most memorable moments.
Freshman year of high school in Jersey, we were allowed to leave campus for lunch and get something to eat. We had to walk through this neighborhood to get to this pizza place we would get pizza at. On the walk back, dumbass asshole me was bet from my friends that I wouldn't smash the pumpkin on some neighbor's lawn. So I did. A guy across the street saw and screamed for me to stop. I just ran. Somehow I got back to the school without them catching me. The next morning on the morning announcements, the principal was talking about how we couldn't walk through that neighborhood anymore during lunch. Now, it was completely because of me, but I'm sure I was the straw that broke the camel's back.
That's a classic high school moment. Just one bad decision and it's everyone's issue, not just yours. I'm sure your friends had a good laugh about it later. But it's funny how a small act can lead to bigger changes, like not being able to walk through that neighborhood anymore. You probably shouldn't have done it, but it sounds like you got away clean in the end.
There's a such thing as a dumb question, and you're not allowed to ask them. Freshman year geometry, the teacher tells us to ask questions, and that there's no such thing as a dumb one. I raised my hand and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What would you do if you were eating Skittles and they turned into a puppy? Years later, a freshman at my lunch table was telling me about the rule, unaware that I was the reason it existed.
So, I can relate to that moment. In high school, I asked a pretty random question in English class about why the sky is blue. The teacher kind of laughed it off, but I realized later I wasn't the only one thinking about silly things. It did get everyone talking, though. Sometimes those questions spark the best conversations. It's funny how those moments stick with you.
From elementary school to high school, no one was allowed to have anything related to peanuts in the classroom. When I was in 6th grade, there were signs on classroom doors saying, "This kid is deadly allergic to peanuts," and "No peanuts allowed," followed by a very angry-looking photo of me. Bad yearbook picture. The funny thing is, I'm not even deadly allergic to peanuts, they just cause really bad itching and swelling.
That sounds like a wild time. It's funny how a sign can change things. Most kids would probably avoid sharing snacks around you, just to be safe. I imagine you got some weird looks, especially with that yearbook photo. But at least you weren't dealing with a real allergy. Being known for something like that is kind of unforgettable, though. Just another weird chapter in school life, I guess.
Not me, but my wife. In college, the school had a very generous photocopying policy. Students were basically allowed unlimited photocopier use within the school's computer labs. My genius wife borrowed a classmate's textbook for a class they shared, photocopied the whole 600-plus pages of it, then returned it. The next semester, students were limited to 200 copies per semester. This rule has existed there ever since.
That's a classic move. It's funny how one clever act can change things for everyone. Your wife really took advantage of that policy. I wonder if her classmate ever found out. It must have been a massive hassle for the school to limit copies after that. It's interesting how one person's actions can lead to new rules that impact a lot of people.
In high school, I ran track and had a sudden urge to try out for the high jump. My very first jump, I came in so hot. I was tearing ass ready to fly. I jumped as high as my body would allow. 3 feet left of the fucking bar and mat. I landed on the track with a thud that stopped the entire field cold. I gave myself a concussion and a bruised kidney. In my county, at every track meet since 1998, there is a mat on the jumper's dominant side, known as the U/Big 4130 format. What a legacy!
That's quite a memory. High school can be wild like that. It's funny to think that a single miscalculated jump could lead to a lasting mark on the track team. The whole U/Big 4130 format thing is an odd way to be remembered, but I guess it shows how those moments stick with you. At least you have a story to tell, even if it wasn't the smoothest attempt.
Sensible footwear. Rule got more specific. Girls could no longer wear Army-issue boots to school. My reasoning. What was more safe and sensible than boots issued to paratroopers? Haircut no shorter than a number 2. British gradings on how close hair is clippered/shaved. Rules got more specific. Girls could no longer have shaved heads. My reasoning. It was a perfectly reasonable haircut, according to the rules. It just didn't occur to them that a girl might want to shave her head. I caused trouble all through my secondary school career, 11 to 16. However, for all that, I was in all the sports teams, lead the school orchestra, was one of the 4 debaters, and got the best exam results of my year. Yet, I was non-conforming, so was always being sent to the head. I started secondary 30 years ago. I hope it's changed.
Sounds like you had quite an experience at school. It's interesting how the rules were so rigid about things like hair and shoes. It's funny though, you were breaking the mold while still excelling in sports and academics. I get the vibe that being different sometimes draws attention, even when you're doing well. I wonder if schools today are more open to individual choices or if they still cling to old rules.
I can't confirm this, but I'm pretty sure this happened because of me. While I was in middle school, my mom and I got up early to stand behind the windows for the taping of the morning NBC News show in Chicago. When I got there, I realized that I could move behind each anchor person as the camera cut to them. I did this for around 20 minutes before going home. A year later, I came back and noticed that the windows were boarded up.
That's an interesting story. It sounds like you had some fun messing around with the cameras. Standing behind those anchors would definitely get you some attention. It's interesting how a simple visit could lead to such a change, though. Makes you wonder if they got tired of the distractions. But hey, at least you got a good memory out of it, even if it ended with boarded windows.
I'm unsure if this was by coincidence or by me. There was a time you could order as much pitchers of beer as you wanted. For my 21st birthday, 25 of my peers and me piled in a Chuck E. Cheese with beer bongs and a mission. I'm sure the 7-year-old next to us will never forget all the older kids jumping on the stage, dancing with the mouse cursing at the video games, or us getting escorted out by Honolulu's finest. The next time I went, there was a 2-pitcher maximum per party.
Sounds like a wild birthday. Chuck E. Cheese isn't really designed for that kind of party. I can picture the chaos with everyone partying hard, and the kids just trying to enjoy their pizza. Getting kicked out by the cops is a memorable end to the night. Not surprised they limited beer after that. Just goes to show how some nights can spiral into something unexpected.
At Kennywood Park, they had tickets for skee ball and games like high-low. I had enough to get like a nacho plate or some other random garbage. I also had enough tickets to get 215 bouncy balls. I threw those things all over the entire park. At People Off, rides you name it, I couldn't run out. Now you could get a max of 5.
That sounds like a wild day at the park. It's funny how those tickets can turn into something so chaotic. I can imagine someone dodging bouncy balls while trying to enjoy a ride. I once did something similar with glow sticks at a concert, just throwing them around. It's those random moments that make for great memories, even if they seem a bit ridiculous at the time.
In high school anatomy class, we had dissect dead, frozen cats. It was disgusting. At the end of every class, each group had to put away their cat in a big fridge in the back of the room. One day, I was the last person to put away our cat, and a part of me thought I hadn't closed the door all the way. Part of me was right. The next day, the entire 3rd floor of the building smelled like death. They had to move classes around, and it messed up most of the morning schedule. To this day, 10 years later, they do not do any animal dissecting. I mostly feel bad for the janitors whose days I ruined, though.
That sounds pretty rough. I can't imagine how bad that smell was. It's funny how one mistake like that can change a whole school's approach to classes. The janitors probably had a tough time cleaning that up. I guess it's good there are alternatives now for dissection. Just shows how things can spiral from something small, right? At least you learned a lesson.
My so is the reason political parties no longer put their signs in roadside trees. A few years ago, political parties got this bright idea that they could hang more signs by putting them in trees. Vote John Smith for liberal plastic signs. Same stuff as real estate signs. Anyway, my so and I are out for a nighttime wander, and as we walk under one of these signs hanging in a tree on a vacant block, he turns to me and says, "Have you ever seen one of these on fire?" I say no, and faster than I can say, "You probably shouldn't do that," he reaches up with a lighter and sets it on fire. He was right when he said it rained fire. Bits of plastic melted and fell down still alight. I have to admit it was kind of awesome. And then the tree caught fire. Political signs weren't allowed in trees after that.
That's an interesting story. Sounds like your so had a moment of spontaneity. I mean, who hasn't thought about setting something on fire at least once? It escalated quickly, though. It's wild how one little act can change a rule. I guess police and fire departments got involved after that. Kind of funny in hindsight how it took a fire to keep those signs out of trees.
In early 1988, at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, I was sitting in Section 13, the rowdy section, and we were throwing empty beer cans in the air with every Mexican wave. There were quite a few Mexican waves, although most of them didn't get much participation outside of Section 13. Anyway, the officials didn't like cans being thrown, and from then on the bar for that part of the ground only served beer in plastic cups.
That sounds wild. I can picture the energy in that section. The whole atmosphere must have been pretty electric with everyone joining in. It's funny how throwing cans led to a change in rules, though. I guess they had to keep things safe. Those little memories can stick with you, especially when you're just having fun with friends and fellow fans. Can't beat a good game day.
Senior shootout in high school, basically tag with Nerf guns, teams, and tournament brackets, for those who didn't have it at their school. They added a rule the year after I graduated because of the Nerf guns I made for my team. Replaced the barrels with PVC or brass pipe, changed out springs for stronger ones, or odd-aid slingshot bands to the plunger. Also made my own darts out of foam backer rod with a fishing weight hot glued into the end, so they were heavier and would fly farther. I think the point I went too far was when I made a barrel for my paintball gun to shoot Nerf darts, though. Next year, they added that all guns must be as bought from the store, no modifications, and no homemade darts.
That sounds like a wild high school experience. It's interesting how competitive stuff gets, especially with something like Nerf guns. I mean, I can see why they'd want to put a stop to modified weapons after your setup. You definitely took it to the next level. It's a shame they had to change the rules, but that's how it goes when someone pushes things too far. Keeps it fun for everyone else, I guess.
I am a very clumsy individual, which doesn't fly in the Army. Scissors are not to be issued to junior soldiers without approval from their section leader. My shop asked for scissors. I am the one who received the scissors. Within 2 minutes, I was bleeding. Within 5 minutes, we no longer had scissors. Ladders are only to be operated by personnel who have received a briefing on proper ladder operation. I was cleaning the brigade emblem at the headquarters building. I thought I could stand on the top rung of a ladder. I was wrong. Soldiers will not access the tool shed unless supervised by an NCO. Several incidents went into this one. Thank God for hard leather combat boots. Copy machine safety will be emphasized at the next company training event. I somehow managed to cut myself on a metal piece of the copy machine paper tray. I don't even know. Soldiers will wear a reflective PT belt at all times while working outside. This one actually wasn't my fault, but I was the one who got hit by a car while trimming bushes. Sorry, everybody.
It's pretty wild how clumsy you can be and still make it through the Army. Like the time you got the scissors and ended up with a cut in minutes. Then there was the ladder incident, thinking you could stand on the top rung. Classic mistake. And that tool shed oversight. At least the combat boots helped. Getting hit by a car while trimming bushes is just bad luck, though. Not a boring day for sure.
When I was 7, we were in gym class, and we were playing baseball in the gym with those safe T-bats, the ones that are a plastic tube with a huge foam donut wrapped around him. Well, one kid went to bat, hit the ball wiffle ball, and threw the bat away. The bat bounced and nailed me in the face. Well, apparently there was a screw sticking out of this supposedly safe bat, and it carved into my forehead, 90 stitches, could see my skull, blood everywhere. Yep, no more baseball in gym class.
That sounds intense. It's crazy how a game can turn into something so serious. I can imagine the panic in the gym. Getting 90 stitches is no joke, especially for a kid. I guess that definitely changed your view on gym class and maybe even baseball for a while. It's wild how these little accidents stick with us. Sometimes, it's just about staying safe, even in supposedly safe environments.
Opinions essays for the high school newspaper get run through the chief student editor, the adult sponsor, the dean of academics, the dean of activities, and the principal. Yeah, after my year as opinions editor, they only had a few opinions essays over each year. They also got rid of the opinions editor position. Scorched earth, anyone?
I remember my high school newspaper days. We had a lot of back and forth about what could go in. It felt like every piece had to pass through a million hands. The opinions editor position got wiped out eventually. Made sense though. Not everyone is ready for different views, especially in a school setting. It kind of killed the vibe of expressing our thoughts. Pretty wild to think about, really.
This will get absolutely no attention because I'm so late, but it's worth a try. My school implemented a rule where each laptop had to be checked before and after lessons, and a note had to be made of which student was using which number laptop, which took up a lot of time. This happened because one day I decided to take every single key off the laptop I was using before putting it back in a laptop locker. No one had any idea who did it. There was a serious warning from every teacher to all the students, and I walked around for the rest of the year with a full set of laptop keys in my bag.
I get it. Sometimes you act on impulse without thinking of the consequences. That day must have been wild, and it sounds like you caused a bit of chaos with the keys. It's funny how one little prank leads to all these new rules. At least you had a unique souvenir for the year. Just goes to show, sometimes a small action can end up changing the whole routine for everyone.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.